Going to call to order the meeting of the Monrovia Planning Commission. So please stand and follow Commissioner Stahura in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Chair Brown. If you could please follow me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Austin.
Here.
Janissa.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
Scheffler. Stahira.
Here.
Vashani.
Here.
Chair Brown.
Here. Okay, so does anyone have any corrections, or would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval of minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Commissioner Austin.
Yes.
Janissa.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Scheffler.
Yes.
Stahira.
Yes.
Vashani.
I'll abstain. I wasn't here at the meeting.
Chair Brown.
I will abstain as well because I wasn't at the last meeting. Should I call out if motion carries with, I forgot how many there are of us altogether, and two of us abstained, so what are we at? Seven? Okay, so 5, so it passed with 5. Okay, so please give me grace. This is my first day as chair. I missed the last meeting, and so Commissioner Stahura created like a really high standard, so I'm really going to try to live up to what you did, Aaron. So please give me grace today. So at this time, members of the public who wish to discuss items that are not on the agenda can speak to the commission. Do we have any public speakers not attached to an agenda item? Okay, doesn't look like we have any. So now we are going to move on to our public hearings. So the first one is public hearing item 1, which is a conditional use permit, CUP 2025-0007, and I'm going to pass it to staff to handle this one.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. This is a request for a conditional use permit. The applicant is requesting a state alcohol beverage control type 47 license to allow the incidental sale of on-site service of beer, wine, and distilled spirits at a new sit-down restaurant in the neighborhood commercial zone. On August 7th, 2025, staff received a written request from the applicant to continue this item to the September 10th, 2025 meeting. The applicant would like some additional time to revise the floor plan and to address some concerns raised by some neighboring properties. So staff recommends that you open the public hearing, take any testimony from members of the public, and continue this item to the September 10th, 2025 meeting. Thank you.
So just to be clear, because we don't have a formal staff report, I'm going to skip asking commissioners if they have any questions and just move straight to the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to open up the public testimony portion of the hearing. This is the time and place for public input regarding this item. So opening the public hearing, let's see. So the testimony is going to be received in this order. The applicant, not sure if they're here or not, persons in favor, persons with concerns, and applicants with, and that's it. We're not going to have a response or rebuttal. So do we have any public speakers for this public hearing? Oh. Please come forward.
And if you're available to come back on September 10th, we will be hearing this item presumably again then. If not, you can go ahead and provide your testimony at this time.
Well, the only reason I'm here is because I got a postal card saying that they were going to be discussing that this evening. So this is the second meeting that I've come to for this. The concern that some of us have, we have apartments and condominiums across the street from this property. I've lived across the street for 45 years, and there's always been a business there, but the business has not caused any problem for us. We've caused no problem for them. But the concern now is that there's going to be outdoor dining with alcohol, and we're concerned about the outdoor dining with the alcohol. If it was inside, it wouldn't have any impact on us. We're concerned about the noise, if there's going to be a situation with noise, with music, and how late they're going to be serving the alcohol. So at one of the previous meetings, we were told that they would be serving alcohol indoors until 10, and then they would stop, and alcohol outside until 9. We don't know if that's been finalized yet. And also, they do have provision within the city to go all the way till midnight. So there are people living right across the street from them that have small children. They're concerned about any noise or problem that would occur in the evening. We're not concerned about things happening in the middle of the daytime, but when it's time for us to go to sleep, we'd like to be able to enjoy our space as well. And there have been other events adjacent to them using their parking lots where tents were put up and they had music. I called to the police without complaining to say that there was a noise problem. My neighbors were calling, and the police did come, and they did turn the noise down, but every time the police left, the noise went back up again. So we're concerned about how this is going to be handled. There's an apartment building adjacent to them, and we're across the street. The people in my area, there are 7 units across the street, there are 50 in my development. So we're concerned about what's going to be happening there. And if they do this indoors, I don't think we have any concern. If they're doing it outdoors and there's no music and there's an attempt to keep it quiet for the residents who live there, we don't have an issue. And we brought this up before. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Can you provide your name for the record, please?
I'm sorry, my name is Michael Kaplan.
Thank you.
And I live across the street at 105 South Mayflower, Unit A.
Thank you.
Thank you. So question, since this is being continued, should we
Chair, yes, you should see if there is a motion to continue the public hearing to September 10th, and if there's
Okay.
a second, and if so, you should take a vote to continue the public hearing to September 10th.
Okay,
I'll move to continue this for our September 10th meeting, the public hearing.
I'll second it.
okay, quick question. I don't need to close the public hearing before they?
Correct, you should keep it open because it's
Okay.
being continued to September
Okay,
10th.
got it, okay. So we have a motion, okay? We have a second. All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Austin?
Yes.
Janasek?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
Scheffler?
Yes.
Stahira?
Yes.
Bashani?
Yes.
Chair Brown?
Yes. Okay, so motion passed. Okay, so now we are moving on to agenda item PH2. And this item is a request to approve a conditional use permit to install a new rooftop wireless telecommunications facility on a new 88 by 6 foot tall mixed use building at 127 West Pomona Avenue and a wireless facility exception pursuant to Monrovia Municipal Code Section 17-46-040B to locate the facility in a discouraged location, a specific plan area with a mix of residential and non-residential uses, and the property is located in the 127 Pomona specific plan zone. Staff, take it away.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, we do have a CUP for to install a new rooftop telecommunications facility at 127 West Pomona. Mr. Damian Pichardo is here on behalf of Coastal Business Group for T-Mobile. Now, the subject location is located in Station Square. This is just north of the metro station. It's in the PD12 zone. As you can see, it's just north, highlighted in yellow, and some of the more recent developments, including Alexa and Moda and Station Square South, are some of the residential developments that are under construction or have been completed. This is just a close-up aerial view. Again, it's in the PD12 zone. Specifically, this site is the 127 Pomona specific plan, which is, again, just south of the I-210 freeway off of the exit of West Evergreen Avenue. And you can see directly south is Hamby Park, and catty corner is the Moda apartment complex. And to provide you some background context on this site, the City Council approved the redevelopment of what was originally an industrial site into a transit-oriented mixed-use development on January 1st, 2020. The Planning Commission approved modifications to that design on August 11th of 2021. And overall, the mixed-use project is a 7-story building. It'll provide 232 apartment units, 25 of which will be affordable and will be dispersed throughout the design of the project. It includes over 8,500 square feet of commercial parking space, a parking garage, and a public plaza, as you can see shown in the image. Now, unfortunately, in order to maintain wireless service, a temporary cell tower is currently located in that public plaza. This was taken before Planning Commission on June 16th, 2022. It required its own CUP, and it required 3 exceptions: placement in a discouraged location, which again is typically a location that has residential uses associated with it. It also exceeded the maximum height limitations for wireless poles, as well as a reduction in setbacks. And obviously, to maintain that wireless service, the original site, the industrial site before this project started construction, had a wireless facility on top of it for T-Mobile. So because that came down, they put this temporary one up in its place. And now they want to replace that temporary facility, the temporary pole, with a new permanent one. This would be its own CUP, which is before you tonight. It'll be a rooftop-mounted facility. It'll be located above the elevator shafts on the top of the building. So it will be a stealth facility. It won't be visible from public view. And it also does require an exception. As I stated, this isn't a specific plan. This is a mixed-use development with 232 apartment units, and as such requires an exception because it's located next to residential. It should be noted that that temporary wireless facility did have specific conditions of approval, specifically that it needed to be removed within 30 months of the facility's permit approval date or prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy for 127 Pomona mixed-use development, whichever occurs first. We have been notified that the development is anticipating temporary certificate of occupancy within the next couple of months, so they're getting pretty close to being finished. And so the construction of the new wireless facility is designed to set, like I said, as a stealth facility. It'll be located on the roof of the new 7-story mixed-use building. Covers about 1,200 square feet in total. Out of that 1,200, it's going to be split into 2 separate sections. It'll be a northern section on the roof for one elevator and a southern section of roof for the other elevator, as shown in the image. Also, you can see the public plaza that will be constructed once the temporary pole is removed. Will become a nice amenity for both the public and the residents as an amenity. Now, those rooftop facilities will be accessible via an exterior ladder. So once you gain restricted, if you've got restricted access to the roof, it would have a separate ladder on the outside of that, which would lead to a door that would also be locked to actually access those facilities. The facility would provide 12 antennas, 12 remote radio units, 4 equipment cabinets, and 1 GPS antenna with related electrical parts. The equipment would be mounted on a steel frame, and then it would be with specific neoprene or rubber mounts that it would be mounted onto, along with flexible connectors, and this would help reduce the equipment noise that it generates. Here we can see that proposed floor plan. So again, this is split up across the building on the north and south section. On the left-hand side, you have the equipment area, again, accessed via a ladder to the enclosure with a locked door. The equipment area would typically hold all the mechanical equipment, and then you have section A and B, which faces northeast and northwest. That would hold the antennas and the remote radio units. The southern section is at the southern portion of the building, and that is the final set of antennas and remote radio units. Now, each enclosure will be screened with a fiberglass reinforced panels. This allows the wireless equipment to function properly. And as shown in the image, each enclosure will be built atop the existing elevator with a parapet wall. Now, a small portion of that parapet, approximately 30 inches, will be replaced with the standard stucco and building material with this fiberglass reinforced panels. And will extend the structure an additional 4.5 feet. This would create a total of a 7-foot screen wall, which would perfectly encapsulate the height of those antennas, completely screening it from public view. Again, so it would be a completely stealth facility and would look as a seamless transition from the elevator to the top as part of the building. The exterior of these fiberglass reinforced panels will utilize the same color and material used on the elevator facades. We have confirmed with the developer that that is a La Habra stucco. It's going to be a trowel finished, and it is in a rustic taupe color. And again, using that same material just provides a seamless transition. So even if you could view it, which we'll see here in a couple of slides, it'll just look like part of the building. The total height, again, is increasing from an additional 4.5 feet to 93 feet. Now, it should be noted that the increased height is allowed under the specific plan. The specific plan allows an additional 18 feet from the rooftop. This would put it at 106 feet total, and the total proposed is only 93 feet, so well below the requirement. As I said, the whole facility will not be visible from public view, so the applicant has provided line of sight drawings showing the public view, so just kind of moving around the building. This is the west location, so you see Evergreen to the north here and Pomona Avenue to the south. You will not be able to see even the top of the enclosure from the ground. And that continues as we move all the way around the building. On the east elevation is the same thing. The north elevation, same thing, and as well as the south elevation. Even if you were on the outside of the Chevron station along Myrtle Avenue, you still wouldn't be able to see it. So the stealth facility is going to work great. Now, to show compliance with RF emissions, the applicant has provided a radio frequency and electromagnetic energy compliance report. And eventually it summarizes that the design will ensure that no one would be walking in front of this, so they will not be affected by any sort of RF emissions that would be above what the FCC allows for the general public. And again, there's no public access up there to get to the roof, and even if you could or break in, there would be a locked door. It should also be noted that there's no public amenities on the roof. There's no rooftop decks or pools or anything of the sort. And proper signage will be placed on the roof in accordance with the FCC and the FAA as well. In addition, the applicant has provided a justification report for the location as well as a noise study. The noise study was submitted by the applicant, was prepared by MD Acoustics LLC. It also confirms that the design will limit the amount of noise produced from the equipment levels that would meet or exceed the required noise standards from the city. There's certain decibel levels that has to be under. This is partly the design as well as, like I said, the neoprene mounts or rubber mounts to help reduce vibration and noise caused by the equipment. And again, as I stated, although it's placed in a discouraged location, discouraged locations often include residential uses, and this includes the specific plan for the subject site. However, an exception can be requested if the proposed location fills a significant gap in coverage for wireless. As you can see in the proposed image, on the left-hand side, you have coverage without that wireless facility. You can see the dark green areas show lack of coverage in that area, and on the right-hand side, with the facility in place, you can see the amount of coverage that it would provide. So it is needed. Additionally, this location is best suited. It is higher than most buildings. So again, at the new height at 93 feet, it won't be, even with that height, that won't be visible from public view, especially with its enclosure stealth design. So this is the best suited location. And although alternative sites in the area do exist, each would present its own challenges. Most of the other buildings are much lower, which would provide more RF emissions to nearby residential of all the development that's occurring down there. And it would also clearly be more visible because the buildings are much lower. And it also would provide issues with line of sight for the emissions and how the cell towers work. The DRC did conduct an advisory review on June 18th, 2025. Courtesy notice was sent out prior to the DRC meeting. There was no written testimony provided, but verbal testimony testimony was provided by one resident. He was in support, but he questions if there would be a permanent backup generator. One is not proposed as a permanent backup generator, but there is a hookup near the mechanical equipment for the development to one that could be plugged into. In addition, the DRC discussed the project and asked the applicant questions if the facility was proposed for more than one provider. The applicant indicated that one is not currently proposed, it's just for T-Mobile currently. It could be modified in the future, but structural modification would be required because this design is very specific. Additional questions were asked by the DRC, specifically regards to equipment installation. Specifically, there was some concerns with penetrations into the building. It was noted that all of the mechanical equipment or the wiring that's provided to it would run through the elevator shafts or along conduits on the roof. But they did recommend approval with an added condition that any and all penetrations made into the building needed to be fire caulked and accessible for inspection to maintain safety and fire protection. Now, apart from standard conditions of approval for wireless facilities, staff has highlighted some of the pertinent and specific conditions. Specifically, the wireless facility is limited to the equipment as it's proposed, with the 12 antennas, the 12 remote radio units, equipment cabinets, and the GPS antenna. Specifically, again, the design, all the antenna components and wireless accessory equipment shall be concealed within the rooftop enclosure and treated with exterior coatings of a color and texture to visually blend with the building. Noise, at all times, it shall not exceed the noise limitations per the Monrovia Municipal Code. It does have to comply with all regulatory and operational standards of the FCC. In addition, all required notices and signs shall be posted on site as required by the FCC and the California Public Utilities Commission. And if a noise complaint does arise and is verified by the police, code enforcement, or other city department, the city may hire a consultant to study, examine, and evaluate that noise complaint and have the permittee pay for that consultant. And that would be reviewed and approved by DRC, and they could make modifications to, or additional conditions to reduce the noise impact. So that does conclude my presentation. Staff and the Development Review Committee recommend approval of both the CUP and the exception with conditions. I myself, as well as the applicant, are here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have questions. You have questions? Go ahead. Number one, I think I take a little exception with it being stealth at 93 feet. I don't think that that's stealth. And that building is already so tall. But beyond that,
Just a reminder that now's the time for questions, and we should.
I'm
Okay.
going to ask staff. Did any of this come in with the when the whole project was proposed? Like, is this the only place this could have gone?
It
Couldn't
is,
be put anywhere else?
it's chosen as the best suited location, again, based
Did you
on-
know about this ahead of time when it was being, when the project came to us as in development stage?
This was an after-the-fact application.
It is an after the fact.
It is, yes.
Okay. Number two, did the people in the MODA, did you get any comments from any of, were they notified?
Yes, we sent out a 300-foot mailing radius and a newspaper notice, and again, same courtesy notice and a postcard during DRC. For Planning Commission, we've received no verbal written testimony up to this point that I'm aware of.
And does the MODA have, how are they getting their telecommunications? All these projects that are being built there, this is, as far as I can remember, the first time we've had this come to us. Do they not have telecommunication service?
Well, again, the temporary pole that's currently in the public plaza of 127 Pomona is providing wireless service
To everybody?
to everyone in the area.
Okay, and so when they built, they knew that this was going to suffice for them as well? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, the temporary pole is temporary, as the name
I
suggests.
understand that.
And this facility will replace that as a permanent
No,
wireless.
I understand that. But it was always to accommodate all the other projects that are being developed down there.
it will provide service to all the other residences in Station Square and beyond as far as the maps show on how far the signal range would provide.
If I might add, the coverage maps that are in one of the attachments
Yeah.
are over a significant portion of Monrovia.
No, I saw
the whole
that.
city.
I saw that. I've been but just up until, I'm just trying to understand that this was what was going to take care of everybody down there. We're not going to have this on all of the buildings. No.
No. No.
Okay.
It should be noted, this is just a T-Mobile provider. There, other providers have other wireless towers and services, such as Verizon.
Now, will they be able to plug on to the T-Mobile like others have done when they kind of cooperate and share?
Currently, this is only for T-Mobile, but again,
That'll be
it could be modified in the future, but as the applicant has indicated, structural modification would have to be applied to this design to accommodate another provider.
Okay. I have to think about that.
Whoever wants to go next.
Sure, I'll go. So a couple questions about, one about the RF exposure and one about the noise study. For the RF exposure, I just want to make sure I have this right. It sounds like there is no place that you can stand on the roof that has any measurable exposure because all of the energy is radiated outward, and you can't stand anywhere on the roof and be above any of the FCC RF exposure limits. Is that correct?
Yes.
If you were on some sort of 93-foot tall lift standing right in front of the antenna, that's where you would encounter this 400%.
Depending on how far away you are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Standing right next to it.
Right.
Okay. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure I had that understood. As far as the noise is concerned, if I read this correctly, I think anywhere interior of the building, the highest noise after the mitigation measures would be like 20-something decibels. Yeah, a small contribution. Is that correct?
21.
21.
Yep.
But how about like at the nearest residence exterior? What is the highest level of noise?
So the closest would be the 7th floor balconies at about 45.
Okay, so that
which
was
would
at
be
those.
under the 50 threshold for the city's noise ordinance.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that that was at those top level balcony residences. Okay. Oh, and then one question, you mentioned access ladders. There aren't ladders that are visible like on the outside of the building, right? You're talking about something that is interior?
It's an exterior ladder on the outside of the top of the elevator shaft that would lead to the enclosure itself that has a door.
I see, okay. So similar visibility to what you were showing. We basically can't see that from the ground?
Not unless you were standing on the roof.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Commissioner Austin.
Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Good report. A couple questions. I'll try to dovetail on that. This is probably more to the consultant, so when he comes up, it's regarding the radio frequency waves at the roof, which there seems to be some concern, but I'll ask that. A question, why two? Do they both go in different directions? Is that the
Yes,
premise on
so
that?
Section A and B, which is the northern section on the north side facing Evergreen Avenue and facing the freeway, has two that face northeast, northwest, and the southern portion would be Section
Okay,
C,
so
which
they-
faces
they
south.
go in
So
distinct
to get-
directions.
Yeah, to get ample coverage.
Sure. And regarding access to the roof, because you wouldn't probably access it through the elevator shaft, does it go through an exit stairwell
I would have
to the roof? Then the follow-up to this would be, those cannot be locked, because if those are fire exits, you can't lock those. And thirdly to this, are there mechanical units for the individual apartments on the roof? If the air conditioner repair person or the HVAC person could they be exposed to what's stating on the executive summary, 400% greater RF factors without that being de-energized?
So that they would be notified prior to, especially with the signage and FCC compliance standards that would be in place. So they should be notified per the recommendations in the report.
Should.
So, yeah, and that would be part of the occupational exposure
Okay.
as indicated in the report.
Okay. Got it.
Well, this is actually what I was getting at. Is it possible to stand in a place and get 400% of the RF exposure limit?
Please repeat that, I'm sorry.
Is it possible to stand in a place and get that 400% RF exposure?
I would still probably defer to the applicant, but
Okay.
I would say no, that because the equipment is above the elevator shaft, even if you got to the roof and you were standing there, it's still going to be above you. Because the enclosure is above the elevator shaft by 9 to 10 feet.
Okay.
Austin, there's no public access other than maintenance, if I'm understanding through your report.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
Yes,
So anybody that's up there is up there for a maintenance purpose, and they're well aware of what's up there.
correct.
No public is going to be up there for any purpose. Thank you.
Prior to the so loud. Prior to the temporary tower, did we have another tower there before the construction?
Yeah, so the initial industrial site before 127 Pomoto started construction had this permanent rooftop on top of the building. Because of the development of 127, that was removed, and then they put in a temporary tower to replace it until this meeting tonight to propose a new
And
permanent one.
that was the T-Mobile one.
Yes,
Okay, so this is basically a replacement of what was there before at a higher level, away from kind of away from the areas around it. Okay, thank you
Correct.
so much.
One last question, if I may. Regarding the residents below, has there been a floor plan or a thought process? Because if it's 400% at the roof and it's saying 23% at the ground, what's it between there and most specifically the right below the units below? And do we know if those are affordable units being placed there?
so the affordable units, to work our way backwards, the affordable units are be dispersed randomly throughout the entire development, so it wouldn't be any one particular unit type directly below. Again, directly below would be the elevator shafts. But my understanding is that the waves would go straight out from the antennas rather than in some sort of downward cone shape. But again, I would defer on the specifics of that to the
Okay,
applicant.
I'll ask again then. Thanks.
Any other questions before we? Thank you. Question. So before we go into the public hearing, there were questions for the consultants to answer. Will we do that after the public hearing, just so I'm clear? Or are the questions answered now by consultants?
You can ask the applicant any questions, and then after the public hearing closed, you can deliberate and ask staff some
Okay.
further questions.
Okay, so I know there were some questions that folks asked and said the consultant would be able to answer them, so can the consultant come up and respond?
You'll want to open the public hearing and invite the applicant up, and he can answer any questions that you have.
Okay, perfect. So let's open the public hearing right now. So this is the time and place for public input regarding this item. When you come up to speak, please state your name for the record. And so the testimony is in the following order: the applicant, then persons in favor, then persons with concerns, and then we'll do applicant response and rebuttal. So is the applicant present? Thank you. Please state your name. for the
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Damian Pichardo with Coastal Business Group representing T-Mobile. Thank you, staff, for the report and answering the majority of those questions. I'll start with answering some of the radio frequency emission questions that I've written down, and we can add on to that if I happen to miss anything. So one of the questions was, is it possible to get 400% of exposure by standing on the roof? Unless you had authorized access to T-Mobile's equipment and somehow got under the antennas and under the mounts into the front side, I don't see a way that it'd be possible for anybody, maintenance or public, to gain access directly in front of those antennas. So if somebody somehow did, it would be unauthorized. We'd have locks, as he mentioned. So as far as T-Mobile could prevent that access, we're going to do that. As part of our FCC standards and guidelines that T-Mobile has to meet, there will be signage throughout the area once you're up into that door on top of the elevator shaft. There'll be signage on the outside of that door saying access restricted, or have different notices depending on the proximity you are to those antennas. Typically, behind the antennas, you're relatively safe, maybe unless you're an inch in the back of it. But again, signage will be there, potential striping, barriers as needed. At the roof level, as Mr. Arnold had mentioned, these antennas are propagating outwards away from the building. Everything's pointing away from the building. Each of those antenna locations are on the outer edge of the building. That's both just from a propagation standpoint. We like to be on the edge of the building so that it's not interfering or bouncing off the building. But from an RFE perspective as well, it helps limit that potential exposure to the RFE. The residential units below, that does get considered in the EME report that is provided as well. It came back as passing. There's no concern with those balconies below. They'd be all operatable within FCC guidelines. To answer another question here about the telecommunications service, just to kind of elaborate on that, yes, this is a T-Mobile facility only. It'll help T-Mobile customers and some E911 coverage as needed. It's a huge gap to be filled both across the highway there and on the other side for the residential units. And we would not, T-Mobile would have no opposition to other carriers being on that rooftop. That would, of course, be up to the developer and establishing that relationship and agreement with them. But in T-Mobile's perspective, we co-locate, as we would call it, with carriers all the time. It's not an issue for us. We work with them often. We have no concern with that from our end. Otherwise, appreciate staff's report on this. I'm here for any other questions that might come up or follow-up questions to my answers.
Any questions? Any follow-up questions?
Well, thank you for answering some of those questions. Concern on the or questions regarding the executive summary on table 1. It says access restrictions. It says uncontrolled. Do I make the assumption that there's no controls on this document that's in front of us? It would be in the table 1, if Austin could share that with you. Likewise, all the reference in the consultant's report says to occupational. Does that mean it's for like a business, or the occupational of repair, because this is a residential structure? And to follow that, are the limits for residential use or areas higher or lower than occupational use? It's page 57 in our staff report.
Yeah, I will say, while he's looking for that specific section, generally, yes, there are higher restrictions on residential or general public access than there are occupational. But because this rooftop is not intended for general public, we ran it on the occupational level, but it does consider the residential locations below. And sorry, this section again you were referring to was?
I was referring to the executive summary. In our report, it's page 57, but it's table 1, where it kind of outlines some of the RF exposures when it talks about 400% on the roof and 23%. But it says access restrictions uncontrolled. And I'm confused, because you're saying to us, and then the consultant said that those are controlled.
I would honestly have to get back.
Or is it typo?
Yeah, I would honestly have to get back on that. I don't want to say anything that is incorrect. This could be a typo. I'm not sure. From our perspective, T-Mobile will be operating within FCC guidelines. The access to that part of the building, to our knowledge, would not be open to the public. Our access to our antenna facility would be access for T-Mobile only, or if the building requested access to that, we could provide that access to them. Within our agreement with Adept, the developer, we could also work with them through those. If they had maintenance on that area of the building, we could work with them to either shut down or turn down specific sections or the full site entirely.
One last question, why have you? If further development in the area takes place, and it's potentially taller than the 93 feet, and it's near the 116, I think it was cited by Austin, but does that affect your capability to run the system? And how does it affect the new neighbors of the RF going out?
Yeah, so in short, anything in front of the antennas that is not FRP, so metal, steel, wood, whatever it may be, trees, buildings, yes, it can block RF emissions, our signal, our service. To the north of the site, I believe it's just the road.
It's highway.
Highway.
Yeah,
so
we're good there.
Don't imagine that. To the south, yeah, if there was a building built directly to the south, it could potentially block some of the propagation going south. It wouldn't completely block it because, again, you have a road, so you have some distance to create. And that's all typical. It happens, and it might be a slight degradation of the service, but I don't think it'd be too impacting based on this design.
Is there any safety concerns the people would, like, potential living that way,
You have
south
to
of
be
it?
pretty close to
Okay.
those, yeah. Yeah, that street is pretty wide from what I call. It wouldn't need to be close.
Okay. Thank you.
And just a follow-up from me, if that's okay. I think Commissioner Austin kind of maybe partially rephrased my question better than I originally did. I was asking about the 400%, but I think a better question would be, what is the exposure level at the closest area that would be accessible by someone on the roof? Like, say, another maintenance person or something. Not getting into your locked enclosure, but just someone on the roof. What would that level be?
I would have to take a look at the report again to get some idea. Let me see. Take a quick look.
And the other thing that I didn't see clearly, and I might have just missed it, is what would the RF exposure be if you were on, say, one of those 7th-floor balconies? Because you give numbers for being on the roof or being in front of the antenna at roof level, and then you also give numbers for the ground, but I didn't see anything clearly about the top-floor residences.
So on question number one, if there's any areas, I'm looking at the map here. This is page 13 of the report. So typically if there was, how do I explain this? So I'm looking at the top of the elevator shaft. The antennas are above. Typically if there was concern with what I would say is on the lower level roof next to the elevator shaft, there would be a call for either striping or barriers, which is not shown on this exhibit. So from what I'm seeing here on initial review right now, I don't see that there's a space somebody can go to without accessing the top of that penthouse, that they'd be exposed above FCC guidelines.
So what you're saying is if the RF exposure percentage was above a certain level, then there would be a call for something like striping to be explicitly on the roof so that someone walking around up there would know, oh, I should be paying attention while I'm putting my feet here.
Correct.
Is that what you're
yeah.
saying?
It'd be a combination of striping or a barrier, which is usually kind of like a cone with a plastic chain, and signage. So
Okay.
It usually comes with both signage and some sort of barrier. Correct.
Okay, so we can infer that those limits were not violated.
Correct,
Because those were not here. Okay. And
And-
any other information about those top-level residences?
Balcony, I probably have to get further into this and probably consult with the people who did this report. But what I do know is this report passed and the balconies passed within FCC regulations.
Okay, I think that would just be nice information to have for the residents, who are the future residents of those residences.
Yeah, and that's something I can provide as well. I'm not the RF engineer, and it's a little bit out of my typical wheelhouse. I try to know enough, but we can definitely get back with more information on that.
I have a quick question while you're still there. Anybody that's up on that rooftop, any type of maintenance, they're 100% aware of the concerns with that tower? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, I don't want to speak for anybody's awareness, but there will be
I'm
yeah,
I
there will be
guess
signages that are bright yellow, red, green.
Right, but they touched on signs. I guess my point being, anybody that's up there for a specific reason related to those antennas, they're well aware?
Oh, yes.
They're
yes.
100% aware of
Techs,
what's...
GCs working on T-Mobile equipment, yeah, they're well aware of safety. They have safety protocols. They shut down the antennas. They do all of that, correct?
Thank you.
Any more questions for the applicant? No?
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move to persons in favor. Do we have anyone in favor? No? Persons with concerns? No? Okay, and I think we covered the applicant response rebuttal piece of it. There's no response or rebuttal. Okay, perfect. So the public hearing is now closed. Okay. So commissioners, you're now able to discuss and debate this item. So whoever wants to go first.
I'm sorry, can I make a point of clarification regarding this item? This particular property has provided cellular service since 2002 or 2003, and a very similar antenna facility was on the rooftop of the industrial building that was here, which was much lower than this one. And we had the same concerns about these radio frequency signals when the temporary pole was placed in the plaza. We were concerned about our inspectors walking through the 5th level of that building being exposed to those radio frequency signals. So we had about a 2-hour training with Dr. Jonathan Kramer. He's an expert on radio frequency signals and wireless facilities. And he explained to us that these radio frequency signals beam out into a straight line. They do not go up or down, or they just go out into a straight line. And the further you are away from those radio frequency signals, the less the risk to your health is. So this facility that's proposed tonight is very similar to what we had in 2002, 2003 when it was installed on that warehouse building, except it's up much higher, much taller than the previous one. And they also beam out into a straight line across. And the risk, as I said, as you get further away, I mean, you have to cross the freeway, and then there's residential areas north of the freeway that we're not going to see a 92-foot tall building across the freeway. So given that this location is filling in a significant gap, and this operation has been in place since 2002, staff felt very comfortable that this would have very low risk, and including anybody working on the rooftop there in that area in the white there, if they're working to repair some mechanical equipment on the roof, they're still well below that actual antenna, which is up much taller on top of that elevator shaft. So they won't be in that straight line, that beam that radiates out. So I just thought I'd just clarify that for the commission.
I have a question that I probably should have asked earlier, but traditionally or typically when you have these types of cell towers going up, what are some noticing or protections or right of inquiries you can give residents? Like, is there something we can build into this to where it's like, you know what, if folks living there have questions, this is your obligation applicant to provide this type of education for people.
Yes, absolutely, Chair, that we do have a condition of approval that requires those types of signs that you're talking about. It's actually required by federal law to have those up.
Okay, can you, like, what do the signs, like, if I have oh, that's all that stuff there. Okay. Okay. You know, listening to everyone's concerns here, I'm thinking, like, if I lived there, I may have questions. Am I safe? Okay, let me go to 10, hold on.
I don't know where it says if you have questions. Under sign of information.
It's the signage / placarding, which would be page 64 on that.
Okay,
document.
64.
It's page 10 of the.
But those are all up on the roof,
Oh, okay, this is an access
right?
point.
Or
I think you're asking,
outdoors.
is there education for the? people
Yes,
living
because
there?
you were talking about, as a city staff person,
Yes.
staff was concerned, and someone came, like, can we say, you know,
Absolutely. I
after
think
lease up, you'll have a training for the people, or, I mean, I don't,
if I could ask the city attorney, maybe if it's appropriate to place a condition of approval that any lease agreements with those tenants have a warning in there that there is wireless equipment on the rooftop and what if any risks there are.
And a number.
And a number to call.
Yeah, I think the potential issue with that is that these conditions would be not applicable to the developer, but to Coastal Business Group. So I can look into whether we can include this condition, but I would have to research it further.
Chair, just as a discussion point, I think we've approved a handful of these wireless things over the past several years. There was one wireless tower that we approved down the street on Huntington, by where the overpass with the mural is. We approved one of those.
Yes.
And then there was one up on Norumbega.
Yes.
In like a plot of city land that was just a tower. Those were both just towers mounted on the ground that were going up. So they weren't on top of a residential building like this. That's right. But we didn't impose anything like that. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, just reminding folks, because I looked back at our history to see what wireless facilities we've approved in the recent past. And then, of course, we had the one where we approved the temporary pole for this.
I think what you were thinking of probably would have to go back to the developer of the property that leases these units or rents these units. They're just renting space from those folks to put their cell tower on. My concern was that sometimes people go to the roof. Don't know why. There might be mechanical reasons, but it's going to be, the roof's going to be accessed through a stairwell that the public should have access to going up and down, and the roof shouldn't be locked. That's against the fire code. So I don't know if the fire department had any thought in this, or we're getting into the weeds on that. That was my concern, if they would get up there. And as far as my other concern is to have that corrected on the executive summary in that table, saying the area is uncontrollable, that maybe staff could work with them and to figure that out if that's an issue.
So I'd like to make a few points of clarification. First, the report is designed as the maximum possible exposure limit. So the report, when it says unrestricted or uncontrolled access, is providing a guide of this is the worst case scenario possible, not that that's what is being proposed. So the report is showing the worst possible case. I also would like to direct you to both page 12 and 13 of that report. Specifically, there are no barrier or chains that are required to section off specific areas of the roof. It requires 0 feet. There are different levels, if you look in there, that have different levels of signs, all color-coded, indicating you have no exposure, some exposure, lethal exposure, right? They have different levels. Even at the door, after you climb the ladder on the exterior of the elevator, it indicates a blue sign indicating if you go beyond this point, you may have some risk of exposure at lower levels. It is, and as John pointed out, it's not until if you crawled under and actually stood directly in front, a couple of inches away from these, would you have lethal amounts, according to this report. Again, I would defer to some of the specifics to the designer of the report or the applicant, but that is what the report shows as a worst-case scenario possible. So to quell any concerns, if you were on the roof or gained access to the roof, you wouldn't have any sort of lethal amounts of exposures according to this report.
And I think it's pretty clear that if it's on top of the elevator shaft and it's a line of sight for exposure, I don't see how you can have exposure in there. I think you guys have mentioned that again and again. I think the idea of education for the thing and putting it part of the lease is a good idea. And I would imagine that's pretty easy to do because the developer is signing a lease for them to use the space. And they're the ones that are going to have to give them the permission and sign the lease. So that could be part of their lease to make that happen. And that could be a condition that easily we can put on there. Of course, she has to look at that. But I'm just saying from my experience. I've seen some of these things in the past in some of our leases on commercial buildings.
Any other discussion? So here's my, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. At this point, any kind of notification would be from the person that leases that building? Is that accurate? In other words, developer, whoever's doing the leasing, whoever end result is going to be leasing the units, any education, that's going to be up to those folks to do that?
Yeah, I believe the city attorney is saying that we can't impose a condition like this on the developer because the developer's the landlord.
That's what, okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be up to him to take any action on it.
And what I've seen in the past, and this is we're going to find out, is that usually the landlords that have these kind of towers on their buildings, which I've managed some and I have handled some in the past, they want those in their leases because it helps protect them for potential losses in the future. So they probably would want it in there because it's every tenant's going to ask about that. So I don't know if we can make that as a condition or not, but it seems pretty straightforward because the lease is being signed with that developer or whoever owns the building.
Yeah, and one suggestion, if, to save us time is, so this is from the applicant, right? So it could be, and tell me if I'm wrong, we can say that the applicant shall cause landlord to include in leases whatever it is we're looking for. So then you bypass, so then the onus is on the applicant to do it.
That would be a mandate by the city, though, at that point, right?
I don't know, however, we can build it into this to where it's an applicant's duty, right? So an applicant shall cause, and then we tell.
Yeah, I don't think we can here. I think this CUP is with T-Mobile and not with the landlord, and therefore we can't have a requirement that applies to the landlord through the CUP.
So we can't say T-Mobile shall cause landlord to do X as part of this conditional use permit?
Well, then you could, but the landlord has no obligation, right? Like the landlord's not a party to the CUP, and therefore, even if you have that language, there's no binding requirement that applies to the landlord.
Yeah, but then what it does is it requires the applicant then to make it happen, or they can't do whatever it is they're asking to do, because then they'll be in violation of the conditions. So it's just a backdoor way. And again, I don't see a landlord saying no to this, right? I think this is a pretty easy fix.
Yeah, I don't think we can include that condition in the CUP.
Okay. So then how does that work if that's something we want to include and you need to look into it? So we can't, do we approve
So-
a motion subject to? Because then.
No,
we're
I'm saying
approving a
that
motion.
I have thought more about it, and we cannot include this condition that would apply to the landlord. The conditions need to apply to T-Mobile, who is the applicant in this situation.
Okay.
And I think, actually thinking about it now, I don't think we need that condition. And the reason being is that this is more of the tenant knowing what's up there so they feel better about the situation.
Correct?
And any landlord is going to have to address it anyways if tenants keep bringing that up as an issue. They're going to be aware of the towers because there's signs all over the place. But if they have questions, it's become more of an issue. They're going to create their own plans in place anyways outside of the CUP.
Okay.
So I'm looking back at it now, I don't think that's something that we need to even address as part of the CUP, given the fact that it's two different entities we're dealing with.
Okay.
That's my personal feeling now, thinking about that, everything we just mentioned, even after what she said, the comment she made.
Okay.
Because it's not about the safety and security, it doesn't affect the safety and security of the tenant, it's more making them feel better if they have questions.
That was my concern, was like, also, when you guys were all raising it too, was, so how do we make sure tenants have a right to ask questions, right? I know we're limited on what you can and can't do for cell phone towers, like there's things you can and can't consider. But how do we build the education piece in there? So maybe that's my question for you. How can we word it then? If we can't say landlord has to do it, how do you word it?
At least personally, understanding more about the analysis and the assumptions and the signage that resulted has assuaged my concerns. And, I don't know that it's
I'm
really
just
necessary
curious.
or any different than
think-
other locations around
Yeah.
other cell
Okay.
towers.
Well, maybe at another time, I would love
Yeah.
to see when you have a situation like this, how do you back into it? I'm just curious. I know when you have a contract, that's how you would do it. You would make someone else do it. So I'm just curious for CUPs. But yeah, if everybody's fine with it, I'm fine with it too. I'm just curious
If this
how
had-
you back into it.
If this hadn't have been an after-the-fact part of the development, you would have had that as part of the development
Okay,
contract.
okay,
But this wasn't after the fact.
So,
And
Okay.
that's why it's the difficulty.
okay.
And
Chair Brown, at this point, can we get a motion?
Go ahead.
Move to approve conditional use permit at CUP 2025-006 and wireless facility exception WTF 2025-001 with conditions as presented in the staff report.
I second.
Commissioner Austin,
Yes.
Janasek,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes,
Scheffler,
Yes.
Stahira,
Yes.
Vashani,
yes,
Chair Brown.
Yes. Okay, so now we're moving on to agenda item. Oh, thank you, everybody, by the way. Lively discussion. Yes.
There might be the disclaimer, I don't know if this goes to city council, the appeal.
Just let me,
I saw
sorry about that.
That's not part of the motion, though. I saw that above there where it says that, but as far as you drop down the
Script.
motion, that's how it's written.
I think
I'm
it's
sorry, if I
the
could,
normal disclaimer, right?
The normal disclaimer.
Just for the record, sorry, Chair and Commissioners, I'm also, if you can have grace for me too as well.
Yeah, and I'm looking, it's
Usually
not on the
our-
script. I'm literally
our
reading off
director-
of the script.
I'm sorry, let me handle that for you. Any action taken by the planning commission tonight may be appealed to the city council. Appeals must be submitted in writing to the city clerk within 10 calendar days.
Thank you. Okay, I'll put a note to add that on here. Okay, am I? Thank you. I'm trying. Really am. Okay, so now we're moving on to agenda item PH3, which is an amendment to the Monrovia Municipal Code to establish local density bonus regulations and affordable housing agreement requirements in Title 17 in compliance with state law. Pass it to staff for the report.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Today, we're presenting draft ordinance number 2025-09, the city's density bonus ordinance. In this presentation, I'll walk you through why we need this update, what it does, and how it ensures Monrovia stays fully aligned with state law while supporting the development of more affordable housing. So as you're aware, the sixth cycle housing element, which covers the period of 2021 to 2029, outlines a plan it outlines a plan of how Monrovia is going to fulfill the RHNA numbers, which is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which outlines the total number and the number of affordable units that the city would need to provide by 2029. In the housing element, there are a series of programs, and one program, Program Home, outlines a series of actions that the city intends to follow to assist in developing this affordable housing. And one of the actions of this program is updating the city's density bonus ordinance. So just to walk you through a little bit of what the city has accomplished in light of this program, in 2022, we started with the reduction of the minimum unit size for multifamily units. Then in 2024, we both removed the CUP requirement for multifamily housing, as well as established multifamily objective design standards. And then this year, we adopted an ADU ordinance. And then most recently, in June, we adopted an inclusionary housing ordinance which requires affordable units in certain developments. So we are well on our way to fulfilling that program, and one of the last pieces is the density bonus ordinance update. So the proposed ordinance aims to codify state law and also formalizes standards that already are applied in practice, and then would also promote the development of affordable housing. The ordinance consolidates all density bonus regulations into one chapter of the municipal code. It compiles key definitions, eligibility thresholds, application procedures, and review timelines, and then it integrates other requirements that provide for affordable housing, such as inclusionary housing, and condenses any repetitive instances into one location within our municipal code. So just to give you, or just to kind of backtrack and say, what is density bonus? It is a state program that incentivizes on-site affordable and special needs housing by granting additional units, concessions or incentives, or waivers or reductions of development standards in exchange for dedicating a percentage of units as affordable, either in the very low, or moderate income level. You can see here a generalized diagram of what density bonus looks like. You can see the fully market rate development at the top, and then the density bonus with the additional units and the additional height with the concession that would be allowed. The affordable units are kind of sprinkled throughout the entire development. So this is what density bonus could look like. As we move through this presentation, I want to identify some key terms that you'll hear over and over. The first one is base density. This is the maximum number of dwelling units that would be allowed under the current zoning ordinance, specific plan, or land use designation. Density bonus ordinance or units are the density increase over the maximum allowed base density based off of the number of affordable units provided. Affordable units are the units subject to affordability restrictions established in state law, as well as in the inclusionary housing chapter. You'll sometimes see this referred to as income-restricted units in this presentation. And lastly, gross total units is the total sum of all units in the project. That would be the base density plus the density bonus units. One thing to keep in mind as we move forward is that the state requires that we round up when you have a calculation that results in a fractional unit. So this would apply to when you calculate the number of base units, base density units, density bonus units, and the affordable units, you would always round up. So density bonus applies to projects that have a minimum of 5 dwelling units. They could be either for sale or for rental. The applicant would receive additional units after setting aside a certain percentage as affordable. This table here identifies the minimum requirements and the maximum requirements and the associated density bonus that you would get with each income category. You can see that each income category, very low, low, and moderate, allows for a maximum density bonus of 50%. The ordinance also codifies other opportunities for bonuses that the state offers. These are outlined here, and they establish the minimum thresholds as well as the bonus that you would receive after providing those minimums. While the city hasn't had many opportunities to effectuate any of these, we wanted to make sure that they were in our code so we could provide or accommodate for these proposals in the future.
So just to be clear, that's saying, could you go back to that?
Yeah.
That's saying like for the disabled veterans line, if you have 10% very low income units that are dedicated to disabled veterans, then you could get a 20% density
Correct.
bonus? Okay, thank you.
So in exchange for providing the affordable units and to offset the developer's cost to provide for these units, the state offers concessions or incentives, waivers, and parking reductions. Concessions or incentives are reductions in development standards such as height, setbacks, FAR, and open space. These requests must result in identifiable cost reductions to produce the affordable housing. The number of concessions allowed does depend on the percentage and income level of the affordable units. For waivers, the waiver includes either a full or partial reduction in a development standard. The request would have to show that the standard physically prevents the project from being built at the permitted density. There is no limit to the number of waivers that can be requested. And the last allowance or assistance is parking reductions. This applies to all density bonus projects. They would be able to utilize a lower parking ratio based off of the number of bedrooms. This is lower than the city's current requirement of 2 spaces or a minimum of 2 spaces per unit. So allows them to spend or develop more or less of the building on parking to kind of offset the development of these additional units. One other thing I want to mention is that when a project is within a half mile of a major transit stop, such as the Station Square, no parking is actually required. They can provide it, but it's not required. And then in addition to these state-mandated reductions, the applicant can apply for additional reductions through either a concession or a waiver. So,
Sorry, I just have one more clarification question on that last one. On number 1 there, with the concessions, you say there it must result in identifiable cost reductions. Isn't it also identifiable and necessary cost reductions? Don't they have to prove that they're necessary to make the project economically feasible?
correct. They do need to submit supportive documentation to show that the reduction of that standard would result in like financial benefits to make that project affordable and built.
Okay, thank you.
So after reviewing that evidence that the applicant supports, the city can, the city is required by the state to approve the request for the concession, incentive, or waiver unless they can make one of these findings for denial. It is on the city to substantiate any reason why they would deny one of these requests. And the state outlines 3 or 4 different findings that are applicable to concessions or waivers. First, for concessions and incentives, the city would have to show that it does not result in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide for the affordable housing costs. We would have to find that it has a specific adverse impact on public health and safety or on a registered historical resource, or the request would be contrary to state or federal law. Waivers are similar to those, the last two findings, which are the specific adverse impact on public health and safety and the historical resource, or if it's contrary to state or federal law. The one that is different is what we would have to show that the request for the reduction or waiver of a development standard would not preclude the construction of the project at the permitted density and the granted concessions or incentives. So I mentioned earlier that the number of concessions that are allowed does depend on the type, depend on the income level and percentage of affordable units. So you can typically receive 1 to 4 concessions based off of the percentage that's that reserved for lower or moderate or very low income. You can achieve 5 concessions if you provide or develop a 100% affordable project, which I'll go into a little bit later how you can do that and what benefits you get from producing a 100% affordable project. So now that we've gone over the basics of density bonus, let's see how it actually applies in real life. So here we outline the basic calculation for density bonus. You first need to determine the base density, which is the maximum that would be allowed under the current zoning or land use designation. Then you would determine what percentage you want to set aside at one income level. You would find the corresponding density bonus and multiply the density bonus percentage to the base density to get the total project size, as well as the percentage of income restricted units. On the right, you can see a example with a base density of 25 units. When you set aside 10% as very low, you would, which is 3 units, you would get a 32.5% density bonus, which would result in a total project of 34 units. With this allowance or reservation of units, you would be allowed to have 2 concessions or incentives. The state also has outlined a way to get additional density bonus above this basic requirement. We call it the stacked density bonus calculation. In order to get this additional density bonus, you first have to meet the maximum percentage in one of the income levels, such as 15% very low income would get you a 50% density bonus. Then you would set aside additional units for a separate income category, either low or moderate, and you can get a density bonus of up to 50% based off of the percentage that you set aside. So there is a way that you can get 100% density bonus. That's when you maximize one of the first income levels. In this scenario on the left, it's 15% very low income, and then when you set aside 15% to moderate income, then you'll get a 100% density bonus. On the right is a more specific example of how this would apply, and with a 25-unit project, with providing very low income in both the base calculation and the additional stack calculation, you could achieve a density bonus of 23 units. Which would result in a project of 48 units. 7 of these units would then be reserved for very low-income households. When you're using the stacked density option, you do have to make sure that the percentage of income-restricted units does not exceed 50% of the base density. So in the scenario noted above, with the very low income units, only 25% of the base density would be reserved, so it would comply with this threshold of 50%. As I mentioned before, 100% affordable projects are something the state outlines. There are very specific requirements that you have to meet in order to get the benefits of a 100% affordable project. So you have to have at least 80% of the units reserved for low-income households, and then up to 20% reserved for moderate income households. then the density bonus that you would get as a result of providing the 100% affordable, you would get density bonus equal to 80% of the low-income units. You could also achieve an unlimited density bonus if you're within a half mile of a major transit stop or within a very low vehicle travel area. So just to see this kind of how it plays out and visually, so let's say a 50-unit project with a base density of 50 units. After you do the calculations for the 80% low income, 20% moderate, and the calculated density bonus, you would result in a project of 140 units. 28 of these units are moderate income, and 112 units are low income.
Good question, really quickly. Is this an exception to the Article 34 rule for 100% affordability? So do we have Article 34 authority, or like how does that fit into 100% affordability using density bonuses?
I would have to defer to city attorney or our expert density bonus consultant. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I'm
Rule
not sure. I would have to look
34
into
is.
that.
Okay.
Another question here. In this scenario, how many concessions or waivers, et cetera, could be requested?
This would be the 5 concessions.
Okay. Oh, because it's the 100%.
Yep.
So it's 5. Thank you.
So now that I've gone through the density bonus requirements, you may be wondering how this relates to the inclusionary housing ordinance that we just adopted. So the same income categories exist in both the inclusionary and density bonus, the very low, low, and moderate. So the units that are required through inclusionary housing could also be used to fulfill density bonus requirements for affordability. It's important to keep in mind that all percentages for affordability are always based off of the base density, so you wouldn't apply that to the density bonus units. Here is a table that shows the basic thresholds for inclusionary housing based off of the project size and tenure, which is rental or sale, and then the associated reserved incomes, or units for reserved incomes. And then on the right-hand side, then you see what the associated density bonus is with this affordability set aside. It's also important to note that while the city's inclusionary housing ordinance does allow for other means to fulfill that inclusionary requirement, with density bonus, you do need to physically provide for the units. So, for instance, in lieu fees would not suffice to satisfy a density bonus affordability requirement. So in a real-world example of how you would apply both inclusionary and density bonus provisions, let's start with a 54 units as base density. You're setting aside 15% as low income, which would fulfill the inclusionary housing requirement. Which also would equate to 9 units. 9 units out of 54 units actually equals 16%, which then corresponds to a 29% density bonus. So after doing all that math, you would result in 70 units, which is 54 base units and 16 density bonus units with 9 low-income units. So the city has also outlined the application process, and it is in alignment with the state requirements. So the first thing is that the applicant will submit the density bonus application with the first required discretionary or ministerial action. This would be either in conjunction with like a conditional use permit variance or as a ministerial action as a building permit. That we would process them according to how that other action has to be processed. Once we receive the application, staff reviews for completeness. We have 30 days to determine whether the application is complete. In this review, we evaluate the calculations for density bonus as well as the request for concessions and waivers and determine if we have enough information to process the application. Then the city makes a decision on this application for density bonus, the decision maker, the decision-making body is the first reviewer of the application. So if it's a discretionary action, it would be the City Planning Commission or the City Council, or it could be the Director of Planning if it's only a building permit application. There are scenarios within our city's code where a multifamily project could go straight to a building permit level. It's important to note that a density bonus application on its own does not require a separate public hearing or decision by a decision-making body above the Director of Planning. Once we have, once we get to that decision-making level, then the state requires that we approve the request for the density bonus unless we can make one of those stringent findings for denial that I went over previously. Again, it's on the city to substantiate why we would deny one of those requests. And then, once we've approved the application, we would work with the applicant and our city attorney to prepare an affordable housing agreement, which would record all the long-term affordability requirements, the requested concessions, incentives, and parking reductions, and it would be in place for the required affordability lengths of 45 years for sale projects and 55 years for rental. So speaking of affordable housing agreements, you may remember that inclusionary housing also requires an affordable housing agreement. In order to reduce redundancy and having applicants submit and record two separate agreements, the proposed ordinance relocates the inclusionary housing, affordable housing agreement, and the required agreement for density bonus projects into one new section in our administration chapter. The requirements of this agreement, as we established in the inclusionary housing ordinance, are not changed. The only thing that's being added is the request for density bonus units, concessions, waivers, et cetera. The same requirements for monitoring and enforcement would apply as well. So, in conclusion, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution Number 2025-002, which would recommend approval of the ordinance to the City Council, and find that the ordinance is exempt from CEQA pursuant to California Code of Regulations, Section 15162A. And if it is adopted, then the ordinance will be presented to City Council. As of right now, it is set to be heard on September 16th if Planning Commission recommends adoption. We also received one public comment letter to the state from the California Housing Defense Fund. They expressed some concerns on how the ordinance may conflict with state law, but our city attorney can address any questions related to that public comment letter that I think you all received as well. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we do the public comment after we discuss, or how, where does
So
it?
we do questions first, questions
Okay.
for staff, and
Okay.
then we open the public testimony portion, and then we hear from the applicants, the cities, then we hear from the public.
Okay, perfect. So questions now. Okay.
I just want clarification for me, because that was a lot. And it's a little bit confusing, But the items that we talked about, the parking, the waivers, all of those benefits were set by the state. So that's not anything that the city came up with.
No.
So we can't change the parking business.
No. We can only make it less stringent. We can't make it more.
More stringent. Okay, so that came down from the state, and this is what you have to do.
Correct.
So in essence, we really don't have a whole lot of leeway on this.
Correct. The aim was to implement the state's requirements and not expand upon it at this point.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to make sure, that came from the state, and it wasn't anything that the planning department came up with.
No.
Who enforces this? Do you have to, if you were to get an application and they went through with it, because it seems like this is really a difficult thing to do. Do you have to submit that information then to the state? So that they, I mean, or is that just something you do every 6 months? You let the state know what you've done anyway?
Well, we have to keep track of the affordable units
Right.
so we can show the state how we fulfilled those RENA numbers.
But I'm talking specifically about this density bonus.
Well, I think we do specify, well, I'm not sure actually, if we specify whether it's through density bonus or inclusionary housing, how those units are created. I just know that we do tell the state how many of each category we have produced. Is your question more, are they identified as density bonus affordable units? or-
Yeah. And are they reported separately beforehand to the state? Does the state monitor this?
I don't believe so,
Okay.
but
You all
Maybe
will
I'm not
monitor
asking
it.
it correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, staff submits an annual report on all the housing units we
Yeah, no,
produce.
yeah.
And those density bonus, really, I don't think they're called out separately, they're just included with all the units. Yeah.
okay.
The affordable units is what they really want to keep track of. Make
So
sure
the
we're
state
fine.
just wants to put this, but they're not really monitoring it or anything?
No, they just want to have incentives for developers to build more.
Okay, that was my questions. Thank you.
I have a question. Oh, was there someone else? Sorry. I'll be quick. This is just so I can understand. All these incentives, waivers, et cetera, are they an exception, just in my head, just I'm kind of going through my little boxes, to prevailing wage? Just curiosity.
I don't have an answer for that.
Oh, okay, I was just
question.
curious. Okay, okay.
We can have someone look into that.
Because I'm going through like analysis in my head, but that's all. Okay.
I could have someone respond quickly if you want. He's our density bonus consultant who helped us prepare this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. My name is David Blumenthal with Sagecrest Planning, a consultant for the city. The short answer is no, that they don't get out of any requirements for, or can request requirements for prevailing wage. So there's those set state laws that trigger the need to provide prevailing wages. They can't request waivers against those state laws. It's only the city's development standards.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking, because when we're talking about financial feasibility, I'm like, okay, they're going to take all this stuff, and then they're, yeah.
It's just against the city standards.
Okay, got it.
And just to expand a little bit on what Commissioner Rose asked, we are offering only the concessions and waivers that the state mandates in their law, nothing more, right?
Correct.
Okay. A few more questions. So, similar concern to the one I raised while we were talking about the inclusionary housing ordinance. One concern I have is kind of a two-tier housing development, like the higher income units are fancy and nice, and the affordable units are not so nice. I know that there's some language in the ordinance that says some things about at least the exterior quality of those units, but can you talk a little bit more about, why I shouldn't be concerned that we're going to have some very nice units and not so nice units?
So the ordinance requires that the units have this access to the same amenities, be comparative in size and location as the market rate units. The exterior can't look any different than the exterior of market rate. The only thing that we do allow is that the interior finishes could be of a lesser quality than of the market rate, just to make them more financially feasible. I mean, that's something that both the inclusionary housing requirements outline, as well as the density bonus requirements.
Okay, thanks for talking about that. On another topic, how does the evaluation of the concession request work? Because from my understanding, like I mentioned earlier, I believe it's true that the city has to say, when a developer asks for a concession, oh, indeed, that is necessary for you to have your project be economically feasible. Is it you guys who are saddled with that responsibility now? Are you prepared to take that on?
It's the decision maker, so it could be the director of planning, it could be you, the city planning commission, it could be city council. The decision-making body has to gather that evidence to make that finding of denial. We do ask that the applicant submit evidence to support their requests, and it's on the decision-making body to evaluate that information, or provide additional information that negates their request.
So part of the application process is the developer explaining why I need to do this to make this economically feasible.
Yes.
And it's up to us or whatever decision maker is considering that application to evaluate that.
Correct. And any decision of denial is appealable, so just like any other action.
Oh, and then our request to exercise the density bonus law a matter of public record and subject to public comment? I'm assuming yes, because it would be
Yes.
part of an application for a CUP.
Yes.
And we would consider that here or one of the other decision-making bodies in the city. Is that correct?
Correct.
I just wanted clarification. I know you covered that the intermixing is already spelled out in the ordinance. The access to common areas is already spelled out. In there too, it had a list of also like, these are the minimum things that are in there. Is it possible to add that there's it's called a permitted transfer where it's like, so right now for the for sale, it gives a first right of refusal to like the city, but like people die, people get divorced, et cetera, et cetera. Can we add a permitted transfer in there where it's like, you know, if I die and my child is a qualified purchaser, that person can then take title and it doesn't just automatically go to the city? Can we?
I would have to defer to our city attorney on this question, on the legality of adding that as a requirement.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe the for sale provisions that are currently in the draft ordinance are based on the provisions in state law, so I do not think we can deviate from those.
So okay. I've seen permitted transfer provisions in there. Can I respectfully request that we look into that or?
Yes, we can look into
Okay,
that.
thank you. That's all I have.
And I have one more question. While we're on that topic of ownership units, how are the prices for ownership units determined?
The same way that we discussed how the for sale prices were calculated for inclusionary would apply.
I'm sorry, my memory is hazy.
I would have to go back to look at how that was presented with inclusionary housing. I don't have that answer available at the moment. It's something I can provide, though.
Okay, I don't think it's a showstopper for this personally, but I would like to be reminded of that if possible.
Okay.
So if we have no more discussion, do we do the public comment now? Okay.
Yes, so you open the public testimony portion of the public hearing.
Okay, this isn't identified on here as a, am I missing it? Okay, so let's open the public hearing. So do we have any, so we do have, we have the applicant?
Sorry,
There
Madam
is
Chair,
no applicant.
Our
it's
consultant
the
may
city.
have an answer to your question.
Oh,
so if
okay.
We can call him up.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Just going back to the question on how affordable sales prices are determined. It's based on income levels. So the state sets your annual income levels. And if you recall back to the inclusionary, it goes to that 80%, 100%, 120%. They're adjusted annually or locally by county. So for LA County, it's a little bit weird. The median income is actually lower than the 100% income because it takes into cost of local costs, basically. It takes into account of local cost. So all of that goes into the accounting of how the sales price is determined, and it's based on that actual income level, much like the rentals would be determined the same way.
Okay, it was clear to me how that results in or how that it gets translated into a rent, but I didn't understand how it got
It's
translated into a
Almost the same formula,
price.
it's just, yeah, into a sales.
interesting, okay.
Thank you. Do we have any persons in favor that would like to speak? Persons with concerns? So I think the one we do have is a person with the written public comment? Okay. So is someone going to read that in, or how does, I don't know how that works.
Could we ask for a summary of that? Because it was very long, and we only received it not that long before this meeting tonight. So can you please summarize what they're saying there, the key points?
I'm going to defer to the city attorney to address the comment letter and our response.
Yeah, so the letter expressed concerns about the ordinance, stating that certain provisions may conflict with density bonus law, which should be implemented without additional restrictions, that the requirements for affordable unit design, location, and access can make some projects, such as those using low-income housing tax credits, less affordable to develop. And because density bonus law allows developers to request waivers from conflicting local standards, the commenter believes that enforcing local standards could present legal challenges. And our office would like to make a few points in response to the public comment letter that you all received earlier today. First, as you know, state density bonus law requires the city to adopt an ordinance that specifies how compliance with state density bonus law will be implemented. And that's exactly what the city's proposed density bonus ordinance does. Second, and importantly, an ordinance cannot clash with the text of density bonus law, as the commenter alleges, when density bonus law does not mention specifications for affordable units. And the commenter here seems to be arguing that the city cannot impose any development standards on the size or physical characteristics of affordable units. And this is an argument that has no support within the text of density bonus law and is also contradicted by density bonus law, specifically by Government Code Section 65915, subsection E1, which the section prohibits the application of any development standard that would physically preclude the construction of a development that meets the criteria of density bonus law. And the section also provides a specific process by which the developer may receive a waiver by showing that a development standard such as size or location requirements will have the effect of physically precluding the development. State law, specifically within the Health and Safety Code, also requires that occupants of affordable units in mixed income developments have access to the same entrances, common areas, and amenities as occupants of the market rate units. And also, the developer is not allowed, per state law, to segregate affordable units to certain areas or floors of a mixed unit development. And finally, as you may have seen, the commenter provided a letter from HCD, which is not relevant here. In that letter, HCD concluded that deed-restricted ADUs can serve to qualify a project for a density bonus under state density bonus law, even if the bonus is for primary units as opposed to ADUs, which does not relate to the design and distribution of affordable units, as the city is proposing in proposed Monrovia Municipal Code, Section 17.38.080. And that concludes our response to the public comment letter.
Thank you. Let's see. So if that's it for public comment, we can close the public hearing and have further discussion, or if someone wants to make a motion, or please.
Can I ask a question of staff? I just thought of this. So when if a developer qualifies for density bonus and say they have 17 more units that they can add, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can take a unit and like split it in half to create 2 units. They have to still be reasonable size. Is that correct? You guys are in control of that.
Well, the city does have minimum size requirements for units.
Okay.
Based off of number of bedrooms. So the unit would have to comply with that unless they asked for a concession or waiver from that development standard. But again, that request would have to be justified.
Oh, I see.
For those
Okay.
findings.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of ways that you can get around adding more, more units and not, because it's expensive to add more units. Okay. I'm just trying to calculate it in my head.
Anybody else? Anybody want to make a motion, or?
Sure, if that's okay. I move to adopt Planning Commission Resolution Number 2025-0002.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Did you want to have your item? Can we approve this without the research on what you were asking to be included?
We can just.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. For the permitted transfer, we
Yeah.
can just, I'm fine with, but I'm curious
Okay,
to hear
okay.
from her, but again, it's,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not gonna,
You don't want to hold it.
yeah. So we had a first, we had a second, right? Did I miss the second? I did. Okay, roll call?
Commissioner Austin?
Yes.
Janasek?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
Scheffler?
Yes.
Stahira?
Yes.
Bashani?
Yes.
Chair Brown?
Yes. The appeal language,
Yes, this is, actually, this is a recommendation of the city council. And
Okay.
the next step will be scheduling this for the September 16th, 2025 meeting.
okay, perfect, thank you. All right, so moving along on our agenda. Now we have the Community Development Director report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on behalf of Director Bermejo, I'd like to just share a brief announcement about the Monrovia Area Partnership Youth and Adult Leadership Academies. These are free programs that are designed to help residents, students, and those who work in Monrovia gain some valuable leadership skills, learn how the city government operations work, and connect with others in the community. Graduates often go on to serve on city boards, commissions, and community groups, making it an excellent way to prepare for future service, including like the Planning Commission. The applications are now open, and the programs will begin in early September. You'll find 2 flyers in front of you on the dais, one for the Youth Academy and one for the Adult Leadership Academy. Please take a moment to review them and consider sharing this information with others who might be interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to any reports or announcements from commissioners. None? All right, so this meeting is adjourned, right? I forgot, we don't do motions for adjourning. Okay, some people do. Okay, perfect.
You could gavel that into being. Don't miss your chance to use that.